Can we all agree that the Sonic franchise existing today is the work of a monkey's paw? How else would you explain how a series that had so many critical blunders is still going when other franchises have died after one? Mass Effect, Dino Crisis, Ninja Gaiden. God knows how many have been dropped after a single massive failure, and yet Sonic got 3 high-profile flops and has still dodged the Reaper. And today we're going to focus on the first of the big 3 and arguably the most well-known. Now, the majority of those that care know of Sonic 06's rocky ride through development and corporate hell to become the abomination it is. But that's not the point of this video. No, I'm here to see if I can polish a turd and maybe make something that could be remembered as a good title, rather than a ghoulish one mentioned only in hushed whispers. Join me as we remake Sonic 06. As always, same rules apply. Focuses on mechanics and plot rather than graphics, UI, frame rate. Changes have to be meaningful, which shouldn't be hard considering what we're dealing with, and it needs to be recognisable as the original title at a glance. Not that you'd ever want to be recognised as the greatest blemish in Sonic's history, but hey. And before we start with the Sonic Project 06 comments, yes, I know it exists and it is by all technical understanding a remake, but it's far too faithful to the source material for what I'm after, and is more akin to a re-release / relaunch than anything. This isn't to say there aren't amazing ideas that are absolutely things I'd want to see in a theoretical remake, but Chaos X is, from what I understand, trying to fix the house, while I'm wanting to tear it all down, grab the stuff that worked, and creating a schematic to build a better one 2 doors down. Also, fair warning, I'll be referencing Sonic Adventure 2 way more than is probably healthy. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we get into the nitty gritty of each individual character and how they play, we need to talk about the momentum issue this game has. Namely, how after you land from jumping you do not conserve any of your movement and have to essentially start from zero again. This would be bad in any game about going fast, but is a little inexcusable when your main form of attack is literally jumping. Even the later games that used boost gameplay still maintained some forward momentum, for God's sake. Now, this is something that P06 fixed along with the general speed of everything, but a full remake should definitely keep this in mind. Anyway, on with the characters. The titular character, the blue blur, the big man himself, and actually probably the least terrible part of this entire debacle, because outside of the general jank and the awful momentum issues, he functions fine. And those issues are mostly fixed in P06, but there are some problems that still prevail even into the update. So let's fix them. First, add homing attack lock-on. It's a bit of a no-brainer for modern Sonic, however I can't tell you how goddamned annoying it is trying to hit a target with your homing attack just to arbitrarily miss. And that's before having to fight the camera at every turn, because it constantly feels the need to jarringly move on a whim. So having it work without consulting your horoscope that day would be pretty nice. Second, make Elise actually do something. As a reminder, this game has sections where Sonic is carrying Elise, and it unlocks the terrifying ability to walk over flat surfaces. I mean, that's technically a death plane, but their existence doesn't add anything, and it could have just easily been regular paths. So what if instead we make it a little bit actually useful? We could make it a screen nuke, but that eats into shadow stick, so that's off the cards. Maybe make it a dash with iframes or something, or maybe a super dash. You know what? Screw it. She doesn't have to do anything. Not like her existence in the stage actually affects gameplay at all. Just don't add pointless obstacles just to justify her being there. Actually, now that we're talking about the powers, can we revamp Sonic's weird gem system? Because quite frankly, they are all, with maybe the exception of the yellow one, borderline useless gimmicks, or acquired so late that you'll get no mileage out of them anyway. And why do you have to keep buying them from the shop? Why not just put them as collectibles in the stages? Because that would mean having to make them explorable. I'm getting ahead of myself. So as a fix, first make them like the power-ups in Sonic Adventure 2, where all the required ones are on the main route, and all the weird things that generally aren't that useful but are kind of fun to play around with are somewhere off the beaten path. And also make them all usable at will, rather than having to flip through the stupid list for no sodding reason. Hell, do that for all the characters. Screw it. Like I said, not much actually wrong with Sonic if that's all I have to complain about. Though I would request that the speed sections, which P06 fixed by the way, have invisible walls when it makes you look behind yourself in that one section during Crisis City. Because it's annoying as hell to just die because you turn slightly too far one way. Shadow is what happens when you carry the you but better character past their initial introduction without a single clue as to where you want to go with them. Which honestly reflects the poor bioweapon clone alien hybrids gameplay in this title, because he plays half like Sonic and half like Shadow the Hedgehog, but not the good parts. Wait, were there good parts? Probably not. Anyway, here's my suggestions for improving his gameplay. Firstly, drop the vehicles. Just straight up trash them. It's a stupid holdover from Shadow the Hedgehog, and it was stupid there too. Why does the quote-unquote ultimate life form need guns, trains, planes and automobiles? They generally do not add anything to the game and also handle like complete ass. Like, dear God, you could have done anything, but you just couldn't let go of your edgy phase. Second, make the fighting feel more like actual fighting, because in the base game it basically is one step removed from Sonic's homing spam, and while P06 went some way to making it slightly better, it is still very much meh. So I propose something more akin to what Sonic Frontiers is going on with the flashy energy kick and ostensibly teleporting around things as you bludgeon them into the dirt. I'm not asking for it to go full Devil May Cry, but Shadow already has the basis for this nonsense in his Chaos Sphere and Super Form. It writes itself, it really does. Just make the ultimate life form live up to their damned name. Sans the motorcycle. Behold, the greatest victim of this rushed as hell game. Well, mechanically. Kind of. Because unlike Sonic and the Lord of Edge, Silver is slow as balls. But he makes up for it by having psychokinetic powers, which is a fancy way of saying he can throw crap with his mind. Rubble, enemies, himself, but damn did it need more time in the oven because it barely works as I assume is intended. Mainly because all the things you pick up are thrown in the order of being picked up, which means it's quite common for your attacks to completely miss because it catches everything in your Katamari ball and flies off to Venezuela. And don't even try throwing them all at once because that's equally as terrible. So here's what we do. Rework his entire kit. I'm dead serious. While P06 fixed a lot of these problems, it doesn't really fix the actual problem, which is the gameplay is really boring. It's simply spinning around collecting junk, yeeting said junk at dudes and repeating ad nauseum, which is probably not helped by the attacks feeling weightless, but hey ho. I suggest keeping that as a basis, but maybe do more fancy things with these 7 buttons that are literally not being used for anything. Maybe the D-pad could be used for a style system which changes how your attacks act and how much energy they use. Like the standard gameplay, one for heavy slam attacks, a little orbital bombardment maybe? Make left trigger be the charge button for the throw all move. Have one of the bumpers be a block that makes a wall with your held objects. Is that too complex for younger players? Maybe, but they could stand to add many more dimensions to his gameplay outside of just endlessly spamming rocks without nuance. I'm not going to dwell on this section too much because there are 6 other playable characters, all have very bare bones gameplay, and realistically there's barely any reason for them to be playable at all. P06 went a good way to making them bearable by updating and improving how they play, but it does nothing to really fix the main problem that makes these side characters so pointless. But we'll get to that later. It's now later, so let's talk about the stages. Excluding the hub levels, there are 9 playable stages in the game, and you'd be forgiven for thinking I misspoke and there's actually 9 stages per story. No, there are 9 stages in the entire game. Every character plays a mission on the exact same maps as everyone else, with the exception of Sonic, who is the only one to have their own purely unique tropical jungle, which was also pretty ass. And because everyone including the side characters plays on the map with no major changes, there is nowhere for any of them to shine. This whole situation is a symptom of a rushed and troubled development, but this is what we can do to fix it. First, remove the hub world or completely rework its purpose, because the hub areas are simply just massive, vacuous spaces inhabited by poorly rendered humans, and I do use that term very loosely. The only thing that's going on in them is pointless side missions that make me want to tear my knackers off. I've never understood Sonic Team's obsession with hub worlds, so we can simply throw it in the trash and just have the missions feed into each other like Sonic Adventure 2. Alternatively, we can retool the side missions in Soliana to little challenge stages or special missions, where you practice/play all the side characters without having to shoehorn them into the main levels. But then, what would the reward be? Because realistically, you can afford all the power-ups just by playing the main stages, and we've already revamped that so it's no longer required. So what? Simple. Money for a returning Chow Garden. Everyone loves the Chow Garden. It doesn't need to make sense in continuity, it was fun as hell anyway. If anyone disagrees, just show them the door. Secondly, redesign the main stages. They need a lot of work because they are sadly rather boring and unmemorable for the most part. Well, aside from Crisis City, which everyone remembers and it even got into Sonic Generations, but playing the exact same level 3 times over kinda kills the joy if I'm honest. So revamping and remodeling would definitely need doing. And I'm not even saying build entire new levels from scratch. Adventure 2 has a good number of levels between the Hero and Dark campaigns that share tile sets but play completely differently and have this little thing called personality. Because let's be real, what would you rather be playing? This? Or this?
I ain't gonna let it get to me, I'm just gonna creep.
There is a very clear distinction between a bespoke level for a single character and a utilitarian one built for everyone. Finally, we improve the final level. Funny how that works out. To give context, the end of the world is where the big bad is literally tearing time and space apart, and the player has to play through sections of stages as one of the 7 characters to collect the Chaos Emerald, to go super, to fight the boss, yada yada yada. Basically, it's the Cannon Score from Sonic Adventure 2, but worse in every aspect. See where Cannon's Core was a uniquely built level with a section designed for every playable character. Enter the World is just snippets of existing stages, only with the added benefit of a flood of enemies, weird gravity holes, and a slowly encroaching purple haze that is specifically designed to give you a migraine. So instead of just chunks of the main stages with random bollocks thrown into them, why not make it so you play through areas where the stages are just mashed together? For example, running down the tracks of Radical Train spliced into the ruins of Kingdom Valley. Or what about the halls of the aquatic base filling with sand from Dusty Desert? And maybe you could have random assets from other stages just appear out of nowhere to help or hinder the player. Oh, and make the orb statues revert things to a non-screwy state to make the stages easier to complete, because right now they're kind of superfluous. And since P06 hasn't got this far yet, Chaos X & Co, you can have this one for free. You could do something super cool and memorable here. Hey, it's boss time, and true to form, these guys stink. Once again, a lot of repeated content. Par for the course really, but other games in the franchise have done this and it was no big deal, right? Well, it wouldn't be if these bosses weren't so freaking tedious. Most of the fights consist of waiting, and waiting, and waiting, before you're actually allowed to attack them back. No word of a lie, there are a couple of bosses in this game where the dev intended way to beat them takes upwards of 5 minutes, which feels like an age because you have almost zero agency in the fight. So the bosses need to be much more dynamic and engaging. Let's see what we can do. This boss boils down to waiting for it to run around until it gets tired, before grinding up its tail and making it crash into the wall. Rinse, repeat. There are speed takedowns of this boss, but speaking from the perspective of a blind attempt, it's just you running around for a bit until it's time to do anything. But I don't think it's that terrible as an intro boss. It's the shadow fight that's an issue. Like I said, the franchise has its fair share of repeat bosses, but this is almost functionally identical aside from throwing you off and its little stampies. So, using the changes we suggested for Shadow's gameplay, we could do some potentially interesting things. Instead of the grind tail, we could maybe attack the thing until it's enraged, then have you dodge as it charges you, making it slam into the walls itself. Still basic, but enough of a change to make it actually a little engaging.
It's no use!
This is unfortunately the most iconic thing in the game, and even accounting for how broken everything else is, it's not even close, because this is the only boss that can insta-kill you that isn't intentionally designed to. You again have to wait for him to leave himself open, which this time is when he's preparing to attack you, and if you get too close when he isn't, he will grab you instantly and throw you back in the direction you came from. And considering your homing attack mostly comes from above, yeah, I don't need to explain this further, do I? And what makes the presentation of this fight just weak in general is the fact that he's just throwing barrels and cafe furniture at you. A guy who can lift blocks of concrete with his mind. This should be a lot cooler. Give him a more diverse pool of attacks. Have him generate a barrier of rubble you have to break through, or have it so you can homing attack his attacks back at him. And with the shadow fight, maybe we can throw some trains around. Get a little chaotic. On the other hand, not got too much against these Shadow and Sonic fights because you can actually be proactive, even if it's somewhat repetitive. Here's the thing about Iblis. Stage 1 and 3, absolutely fine. Not amazing, but still decent. Stage 2, on the other hand, now that can die in a hole. Because the dev intended way is to stand around for a minute at a time, waiting for the ceiling to fall so you can attack the boss once. I want to point out that for one attack, I could beat a Sonic Adventure 2 boss in its entirety. Maybe two, depending on which ones I chose. It's super boring. It's a weird worm slug in a lava pool. We could have easily gone with something akin to Chaos 4 from Sonic Adventure, where it's doing the whole shark thing, and as a basic idea, that's head and shoulders above what we got here. Or maybe Biolizard from Adventure 2, I mean the pieces are all there. Anything would be preferable to 5 minutes of admiring cave walls. Oh, some more waiting. Fantastic. I say that, it's still more interesting than Iblis 2, because it's at least a little dynamic. But he's still a sit and wait boss, and we can't have that now, can we? Sonic's version, let's change the venue. It's in the middle of a featureless basin and has nothing else going for it. What about making it like the chase bosses the series has been using for a good while now? Running across the trees, dodging rockets, and using the robots it drops to jump up it. Like Biolizard. Simple solution, but I think a lot more interesting than just running around a field. As for Silver, with a more responsive pyrokinesis grab, how it is now is fine. We could, however, add Sonic using his powers to tear the legs off, rather than just popping off of their own volition.
I'll take you out myself!
The 7-minute boss. The 7-minute boss. The 7-minute boss. Why does Sonic have the slowest bosses in the entire game? This is especially crap because this is the battle arena. There is no room to run and you just have to lazily stroll around until he opens himself up for attack. It's an almost perfect storm of bad boss design. Now, what you could do is another chase boss. It's Sonic, it works, shut up. Avoiding his attacks and bounce attacking loose ship plates to launch them airborne for Eggman to fly into. You can even have parts where he destroys the path and you have to perform the spot jump they use in earlier levels. And of course, the classic homing attack up to the cockpit. The aim is to make this fight more dynamic and I feel this will do just that.
I'll make sure you regret this, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Let me tell you, these fights are fine. You aren't waiting around for ages, and aside from some components, they are visually easy to understand. Only thing I can suggest would be to make this attack from Mephiles 1 more clear as to how you dodge, and maybe explain that you need to use Silver first in Solaris Phase 1. Otherwise, they're good to go. We don't typically want to fiddle with the plot when remaking a game, but when it's this disjointed, this half-baked, it needs a lot more than a little touch-up. Because as it stands, the best thing about 06's story is that it retcons itself out of existence. We're not going to go over the plot with a fine-tooth comb, but we are going to target the biggest issues. If you see anyone discussing this game, at least will probably come up in conversation for one reason or another, and it's never positive. Ignoring the fact that she's more a plot device than a character, and all the Mary Soonis, here's 3 main points that need sorting. 1. Stop capturing her so much. Elise is captured a grand total of 4 times throughout the very short runtime, and this has the unfortunate side effect of her development feeling very stilted. She has these short interactions with Sonic and suddenly she's head over heels and willing to trust that he'll save her life no matter what. I mean, the character was intentionally written to be sheltered, but this is kind of weird and feels out of place even in a Sonic game. You could probably fix this by removing the rescue from Dusty Desert and just having Sonic fight tooth and nail to save her after the railway. Cuts out 2 captures, and while it doesn't help the characterization, we'll try to sort that next. 2. Don't have the trigger be her crying. So, King of Soliana traps an apocalyptic flame demon and a small child with the stipulation that if she ever cries, the demon will escape and destroy the world. Sonic Team, my friends, have you ever met a child before? They are very emotional creatures. Are you trying to tell me she never cried once? At all? For 10 years? I get the idea of someone being emotionally distant, but she screams and emotes when being captured, so it's all over the place. What it probably should have been is that Iblis reacts to strong emotional outbursts rather than just, you cry, we die. That way, her being emotionally distant can be because of the flames manifesting when she was younger, and her having to learn how to control her emotions, causing her to be this way. Next, we all know what's coming. 3. Remove the romance subplot. This whole thing just feels really wrong, mostly because of how poorly it's written, but also because of the light bestiality undertones, which was going to happen sooner or later considering the whole humans and anthropomorphic animal people living together thing. Rather than building up organically, Elise kind of just leaps to romantic feelings for the blue blur, which culminates in the kiss. One of the most awkward story moments I've ever experienced. Ever. It's just so forced. Honestly, just remove it and replace the kiss with some hopes and prayers BS. Would be corny, but would avoid whatever this is. You could probably leave it at that story-wise and it would probably be no worse than any other modern Sonic outing. But there are 2 other things that really should be looked at to truly improve the plot. 1. Decide how time travel works. The whole story is predicated on time travel, which is always a great way to needlessly complicate your plot. What doesn't help, however, is 06 isn't particularly sure how it's even supposed to work. Because Eggman needed to mimic the power of Solaris using techno-nonsense and a Chaos Emerald. Mephiles is part of Solaris, so he needs a Chaos Emerald to reach the required power. But then the Hedgehogs are like, we got 2 Chaos Emeralds, we're gonna rub them together and break space time. Yeah, I know the Chaos Emeralds react to the thoughts and desires of the user, yada yada, but the Emeralds started to become a plot crutch at this point in the series, and this genuinely feels like they wrote themselves into a corner and had to MacGuffin their way back out again. Seems pretty lazy. The heroes could have easily just had to repair and use Eggman's machine, which would at least add some level of consistency. 2. Do something with Mephiles. The idea of a supernatural shadow entity that manipulates, tricks and all around messes with people's heads is kinda cool and pretty mature as far as Sonic titles go. The issue, he's not subtle and he barely does anything. Silver, you should kill Sonic and save the world. Shadow, the humans betrayed you, join me and we can destroy the world. Then he just says screw it and kills Sonic himself, kind of defeating his whole shtick and rendering most of the game's plot irrelevant. And frankly, him becoming Solaris, a reality-ending Mega Beast, feels like a major disservice and feels very impersonal. Like it escalates too far. Make him more manipulative, more cloak and dagger and more ominous. Maybe you have second form Solaris be more Mephiles-y. Genuinely, he could have probably gone down as one of the best villains in the franchise. Another victim of corporate chicanery, I guess. So that's what I'd want to see in a Sonic 06 remake. I hope you enjoyed. Do you like my ideas? Do you agree? Or have I pissed off the Sonic fanbase? I am the Resident Gremlin, remember to like and subscribe, and if the fanboys don't get their hands on me, I'll see you next time.